Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Ed Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the videos you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like, because the purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and any issues related to those issues. A hearty shout out to the Rabyd Nation. Join the nation by hitting that subscribe button, and if you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, hit the join button, and your membership options, which lead to citizenship in the Rabyd Nation, will be presented to you. Today I want to continue on our Thursday discussions, this running discussion on the existence, non-existence of God, the attributes of God, and various other spiritual woo forms from polytheism and everything else. Eventually I'll get to all of those, but Thursdays is always this running questions about God and why this and why that. Have to deal with a couple things right out the gate. It's not necessarily that I always believe or think the question's a good one. It's just questions I've heard about God that seem to undercut his authority. I have on occasion said there's ways around this theologically speaking, and so on and so forth. So the idea is to postulate the question, see what happens in the comments. But I also am going to give my take on it a little bit, but not necessarily in a way where I am not amendable to counsel, okay? And I think a lot of people think, oh, you're just pontificating your view. Another thing I have to deal with, it's come up a lot lately, but it's come up on the entire existence of the channel, where it says, well, you just don't like something about God, or you just dislike this or whatever, and it's all about your likes and dislikes. I beg to differ, okay? I think I would like the idea of an actual God that actually dispenses justice so people don't get away with it. I think I would like the idea that there's a God out there watching things and keeping a close eye on things and make sure things go well. It is truly benevolent. In other words, I think a benevolent creator would be a great idea if he actually existed. The problem is, if you have a benevolent creator, he's probably not omnipotent or omniscient, and that's where this question comes from today. If God is the creator, why is suffering so inherent to his system? Why is it so necessary that this whole cycle of life and death even exists? Okay, because what we're dealing with here is the fact that mere existence is predicated by suffering and death. Okay, it's part of the system. It's inescapable. I mean, there's literally creatures whose whole existence is killing other creatures in order to survive. You have entire species that are the only reason they survive is they're so prolific. They lay thousands and thousands of eggs, only have 2 or 3 of them survive because the rest get eaten by predators. There's this whole cycle of life and death that is so inescapable and so much a part of the system and how the ecosystem works that you'd have to say it was designed into the system. So if God designed this thing, then he designed suffering and death into the system in order to make it work. Now, a lot of people will sit there, well, but that's all the result of the fall. Well, let's go to before the fall. Those of you who love your Bible so much, even though it doesn't make sense and has a lot of contradictions, let's go to the beginning of the story with Adam and Eve. Okay, so Adam and Eve have to eat, okay, and they have to eat plants, something that was alive. Okay, so already at the beginning, we have this inherent life and death cycle already at the beginning designed into the system long before the fall, okay? We have God, when he does his creative act, created in the trees and in Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve have to pluck from the trees, eat them. The digestive system is going to kill that plant and in order to be digested, okay? That's how it works, okay, unless we're having some sort of miraculous whatever thing back in the day. And even the command of God then doesn't make a lot of sense. You will surely die as a consequence if they didn't have some understanding of what death was. I think the first question I would have done if I didn't understand what death was, and he makes that command, is, excuse me, Mr. God, can you tell us what death is? We don't really understand the concept. Okay, but apparently they did understand the concept because they don't ask that question. And God doesn't seem to have a need to explain it. So right out the get-go, long before Adam and Eve fell, maybe a few hours, who knows. But before they fell, there's death. And there's suffering. And there's something that has to die and so other things can live. And this is an inescapable part of the system. You can sit there and say after the fall, tooth and claw, get evolved, but that takes a little bit. And two, you're still saying that all of this had to be affected because of two human beings' sin. That's still a problematic thing from a theological point of view. But from a simple creation point of view, you'd have to say that there was a certain element of suffering and death in it, inherent in the system. You'd say that herbivores, we're all herbivores, we're still all killing plants. Something has to die in order for us to live. It's inherent. And now you're just saying, now we're going to kill each other, okay? And, certain predator species and all this other stuff comes about. And it's an indication, to me, of poor design, okay? And a lot of people say, well, you just don't have your likes and dislikes. I get that all the time, of how this whole thing is about my likes and dislikes. Well, it seems strange that my likes and dislikes would even exist if God is in control, but here's the thing. It isn't about that. We have this supposed omniscient, omnipotent creator, and we mere humans can see different ways that he would have created it without having inherent suffering in it. Okay, we can see this. He surely would have, and he could have considered it. And then we would have to say that it was a deliberate choice of God to create the system the way it is, and that suffering is a part of it. So which that really undercuts his benevolence. Okay, the one thing that, you either have to sit there and say God is this omnipotent, omniscient being that created all this, and he's not benevolent at all. He's completely indifferent. Or you have to say he is benevolent, but he can only do so much, and when things fall off the rails, he can't really fix it. Okay, because, even, I've been reading the book, Jonathan Pierce's book, 30 Arguments Against the Existence of God, right? Yeah, this one, I don't know if you can see that, bright light. But I've been reading it. And one of his chapters is, why don't we photosynthesize? It's a great chapter, because he points out that we could all draw our energy from the sun, that we wouldn't need to draw our energy from these creatures or critters that we have to ingest, or plants we have to. Why don't we just all photosynthesize? There are examples of animals that do have some photosynthesis capability. Why isn't that inherent? Why isn't that system inherent? So that the suffering and death isn't necessary at all. Other things that God could do that we mere humans can figure out, like God couldn't just do perpetual miracles in some way so that suffering and death simply are not necessary elements of the system at all. That somehow his miracles would be an inherent thing in the system without miracles, suddenly being miracles anymore. Couldn't you do that? How about we create beings that generate their own energy and don't need outsources at all? How about if we're all born with a battery that just keeps this going? And then finally, why the need for a physical world that requires all this suffering and death in the first place? Why can't we just all be created in heaven and go there and live and have peace and harmony? Why all the riffraff? See, this is not a statement about my likes or dislikes. This is a statement about if I, a mere human, and other mere humans can see how this could be better if it was designed, okay, as us as flawed designers, if we can see that, surely the infinite knowledge, infinite power designer could have saw these things as well and maybe come up with some that are better. And yet, here we are in a world that completely requires suffering and death in the ecosystem to exist. It can't exist without this kind of wholesale slaughter death. Go watch some episode of animals hunting in the wilds of Africa, or wolf packs and doing it in the Arctic Circle, or whatever you want to do. And when an animal gets taken down and killed by these packs of animals, it's wholesale slaughter munchie time. And that is inherently part of the system, okay, that God has created, if he's the creator. Now, if we take the Bible literally, suffering and death have to be there out the gate in order for it to work. And then also by God's design, it has the potential to get worse according to his own admission of his command. Okay, and so if I'm taking the biblical omni-God, he gets a double nasty knock because he put it in the system ahead of time, eat the food of the tree, where you need suffering and death to survive, and you give a command that involves death that apparently everybody understands what death is. Okay, so you have a problem even greater there if you choose a biblical God. And this all points to simply the fact that, well, let's be honest, it's probably not designed. And that's the hard part a lot of you people have. And why do theists want design? Okay, because they want to create this mythology about themselves. It's, you sit there and talk about, I just have my preferences, my likes or dislikes. Well, why do you want a God? See, I'm an anti-theist. I don't want a God. Okay, I'm done with him. I'm done with the whole concept. Okay, but why do you want him? And I'm going to tell you why. I think biblical theists want a God to be a creator because then they can read the creation story and they're put at the top, the pinnacle of creation. They can pat themselves on the back for being human beings. And aren't we great because we're the great human beings that God has created and is going to save for eternity? And it's a real ego stroker, isn't it? Okay, that you are the pinnacle of God's creation. I'm sorry, some of you need to go listen to Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot and realize how not a pinnacle of creation you are. I mean, I'm sorry. We are the latest incarnation of the hominid species that happens to be very, very successful. The fact is there were a lot of hominid species besides us that somehow died off, probably because they didn't adapt to change like we did, in the way that we could eat anything. And they probably just, they just weren't competitive with us. We just were smarter, cleverer, aka Homo sapiens, the clever ape. That's how we did it. Okay, and it didn't have a flippin' thing to do with God's design, because I don't think it is designed. Okay, see, to me, the suffering and death as a counter-argument are the biggest cases for naturalism, materialism. They're the biggest cases for evolution and Big Bang cosmology and all of it as something that just is, and there is no guiding force behind it other than natural law, which are descriptive, not proscriptive, people. Before you start jumping in law, who passed those laws? This isn't a court, okay? In science, laws are things that we observe and say, this always happens, okay? We don't have any reason to say it doesn't happen. And I'm sorry, but this is the biggest case. The suffering and death of the world simply becomes what is, okay? It is what it is. And I have that, discussion with ethics with my fellow atheists from time to time, because yes, indeed, atheists do have ethics and morality. And we go back to this question of, okay, if it's not designed, then what are the ethics and morals of it? Well, as a social species, I think we have those subjective ethics, and all ethics are subjective at this point for me, including the ethics of God, by the way. Your God doesn't have objective morality either. But the point of the fact of the matter is this isn't about my likes or dislikes or what I find morally subjectively reprehensible. This is about the fact that inherent to the design of God, whether it's a biblical God or not, is this cycle of life, death, suffering, death, slaughter, death, where certain species only exist to feed other species. They only survive because other species eat them, and on the cycle goes. And we mere humans can see how certain things could have eliminated that if God had created it a different way. How much more should the omnipotent, omniscient creator have seen and had the power to do? I'm sorry. Once again, I think this is a pretty damning, the problem of evil, the problem of suffering has been the most damning argument against the existence of God and remains so. And it's because suffering and death are so inherent to the system of how existence even continues to exist here on planet Earth. The fact that life exists on planet Earth requires suffering and death. And I, as a naturalist, an evolutionist, can come to terms with that far better than any theist with their argument for or against God. And that's just simply the truth. But as always, this is a running discussion on Thursdays about God and his existence and his attributes and other issues related to it. And I would be interested to hear what you have to say in the comments. As always, it gets very entertaining for me to watch the comments section blow up on some of these videos. And I have a lot of fun with it. But, you're welcome to try to defend this God, I guess, if that's what you want to do. So thank you once again for stopping by. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. There is no afterlife. And, so you want to take your time, your money, your opportunities, and give them to the people you love and care for, building up yourself and building a better world. And don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith, because that's a dead end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.